Guild Wars, Sea of Sorrows. Chapter 20. The boom of the detonation echoed across the harbor with the impact of a thunderclap. The quarterdeck of the Nomad splintered from the concussion. Fire caught the timbers and spread through the back of the clipper with the speed of a racing centaur. On the dock, Matcha screamed and called for aid, calling sailors on the docks and guards from the town with shouts of fire. Fire on the wharf. Aboard the Nomad, sailors dove into the ocean, choosing the cold darkness of waves over the scorching heat of flame. Only one remained on the upper deck, his steely blue eyes flashing with impenetrable surety. Virid raised his hands in the motions of magic, holding his staff high to summon wind. As flame trickled up the wrappings around his wrists, Virid stood fast and directed the steadily rising gale, pressing it into service against the fire. Matcha made it to the top of the gangplank, raising one hand to shield her eyes from the glare. "What are you doing?" "We have to get off the ship before the munitions catch fire. I'm not leaving my captain." Virid's voice was barely audible above the inferno. "I say is dead." Matcha grabbed for him, but her fingers were singed by the burning straps that wrapped around the elementalist's wrist. "We have to go." "I'm not leaving my captain." The wizard's voice cracked like glass. Renewing his efforts, Virid pounded his staff against the deck of the ship. Magic thundered around him, pouring over Virid's body, churning wind and flame into a storm across his skin. Masha was thrust back by the power of it. The elementalist continued to chant, his eyes wide, and with a roar of energy, his body transformed into a tornado of swirling wind. "Virid, no. You can't." Matcha raised a hand before her eyes to shield them from the overwhelming gusts. But if the elementalist could still hear her, the tornado didn't change its path. She stumbled backward. With a curse, Matcha clawed her way back to the gangplank and made her way down it to the dock, unwilling to lose her own life to the blaze. The tornado-bound Vera showed no such self-interest. Amid the flame and thick clouds of smoke, he spun unwaveringly, fire lacing each sweep of massive wind as he pounded the ship with gusts. The tornado drew spray and water from the sea around the clipper, drenching the deck as well as blowing the fire out. As the tornado slowed, Virid could again be seen walking across the Nomad's deck. Clothing alight, hair greasy with sweat, and skin pink from the heat, Virid took step after step toward the rear of the ship, pushing the flame apart with wind and storm despite his own injuries. There, amid the wreckage of the cabin, lay two bodies. Protected from the initial blast by the solid oak wall, they now huddled in the center of the room. Kobaya had managed to wrap a blanket about them, dumping water from the wash basin over it to slow the fire. Even with that, the smoke had overcome them, and Ize lay huddled in Kobaya's arms, both of them unconscious from the heat. Virid's anger was like the tempest of storm winds. He pushed through the blaze, tamping out the fire, fighting his way toward them. The elementalist's wrappings roasted, and his flesh seared. But no pain, no suffering, no injury would make him abandon his loyalties. At last, Virid knelt beside the sodden, roasting blanket pile. They were alive. He tucked the blanket tightly around them, like a father putting his children to rest. "I only have strength enough for two, Captain," Virid whispered to the unconscious IA, not caring if she could hear him. "You'll be all right." With a great effort of will, he summoned the wind once more. This time, he commanded the gale to lift the sodden burden, raising it high above the leaping flames. As the cabin began to collapse around him, Virid's final spell swept Isai and Kobaya out the shattered windows and into the night. On the dock, a bucket brigade had started. Sailors and workmen, guards and villagers struggled to dump water on the flames before the blaze could spread. Matcha stood at the forefront. As the wind lowered its bundle to the boards, Matcha raced toward it, tears streaking the ash on her cheeks. "Colby!" she shouted. dragging away the smoking blanket. "Are you all right? By the alchemy, say something." "Please." She shook him, splashing seawater on his face until he roused. "Blessings on the etheric equation." The Asura breathed gratefully. "You're alive." "Matcha?" he asked groggily. She smiled and nodded, squeezing his hand in hers. Just at that moment, the munitions room on the Nomad caught fire. There was a roar of flame and a thundering boom as the stern of the ship detonated in a massive explosion of spraying gunpowder and shot. Dawn was rising, pink stripes lightening the horizon and giving them a clear view of the damage. The fore of the Nomad was in fair shape, but the rear, the quarterdeck, the captain's cabin, and the lower berths were seared, blackened, and torn open. "Who would do this?" Isay asked quietly, standing on the end of the dock. "Vera, my brave, loyal friend." Tears overwhelmed her, and she bent her head as they slid down ash-stained cheeks. Kobaya pulled Isay close, cradling her head against his chest as she wept. Kobaya looked down at Matcha. "What did you see?" The Asura was covered in ash and soot, her once bright braids a lange of grays. "I was on the Pride. A messenger from the city stopped by. I didn't get a good look at him. Just some human dressed in normal clothes and said he had a package for you. I told him to leave it, and he wouldn't. After he left, I followed him here." "I'm glad you did." Kobaya gently squeezed Matcha's shoulder, trying to ignore the way his hand shook. "You saved our lives." Matcha's face reddened, and she nodded mutely. Yet again, Kobaya thought, smiling down at the Asura, "A little angel saved my life." "Bivian, Matcha." I sigh. "I'm fortunate to have them in my life." The fire was out aboard the Nomad, and the ship's crew moved across her deck numbly. Assessing the damage, "It's going to take weeks to repair," Isaiah said, shaking her head. "Hundreds of gold." "I'll help pay for it. It's my fault that this happened aboard your ship. They were targeting me, not you. You're still a captain, and the Nomad will sail again." Kobaya struggled to focus his emotions. Anger, pain, frustration, and shock fought for his attention. But right now, Isay needed him to be stoic. He managed a reassuring smile for her sake. "Who did this?" Isay met his eyes frankly. "Was it Yam?" "Possibly. Or Grimjaw. Both of them have good reason to be angry at me. So does Nodobi. I could probably think of 2 or 3 others who've sworn vengeance against you over the years." Matcha chimed in helpfully. Kobaya made a face. "What?" she chided. "See, Mon Kobi. There's an old Asuran saying, you can judge an inventor's success by his enemy's firepower. Yours happened to be pretty well armed." Kobaya stayed on topic. "If it was a bomb made of sparks and oil, I'd guess that a char made it. If it was magic, it'd more likely be of Asuran make. Did you get any kind of look inside the package before it blew up, Isaiah?" "Not really. It was shiny, I remember that." She sighed. "I don't think I'm going to be much help." Matcha glared at Isaiah. "Shiny? What? Did you think it was a Winter's Day present?" Isaiah bristled, and fearing for his life, Kobaya stepped in. "I'm going to have a talk with Yam and Grimjaw. It's likely one of them was behind this." He clenched his fists and grinned. "If they were, they're going to regret their part in it." "Just barge in and ask," Isay admonished him. "Do you really think they'll tell you the truth?" "Why not? I've never been afraid to go straight to the source." "I think the word you used was incorrigible." Kobaya winked. "Are you coming with me?" Isay had little choice. With a frown, she turned to follow. Glaring and ducking her head, Matcha trotted along behind the pair. The 3 walked through the village toward Yam's general store. Although dawn brightened the horizon, they could see that workers had been inside the store for some time, loading the shelves and readying the day's inventory. Kobaya pounded on the closed door of the shop, his thudding fist shaking it so furiously that it creaked on its hinges. When those inside didn't respond at once, Kobaya banged on it again, yelling, "Yum!" A young Asura opened the door a sliver, staring at Kobaya with wide eyes. "What do you want? Where's Yom?" Kobaya pushed the door open, shoving his way past the boy. "Go get him. Tell him Kobaya Mariner's here, and I'm not leaving till we have a chat." Gulping, the nervous youth rushed into the store, weaving through piles of imported cotton, foodstuffs, and trade goods toward a light in an office behind the main counter. Kobaya followed. Other Asura scattered before him, stumbling and dropping their wares in surprise as he strode angrily through the store. Yom sat in his office behind a wide desk, 3 pencils tucked behind his ears. On the shelves surrounding him were books, stacks of paperwork, small trinkets and tools, and a pile of rucksacks waiting to be repaired. When the young Asura pushed open the door, he scowled and snarled. "Blip! What is your hypertrophic malfunction?" I said I didn't want to be disturbed. Kobaya didn't wait to be invited. Pushing past the Asuran lad, he strode to Yum's desk and slammed his hands down on the tabletop. "Tell me about the bomb, you sniveling little scrit." Yum yelped, aghast. One of the pencils fell from behind his ear. Matcha and Isaye stepped into the doorway behind him, the first scowling fiercely, the second eyeing the Asura and his surroundings with a studious gaze. "What do you want?" Yum protested with a squeak. Regaining his equilibrium, the shopkeep pulled the other pencils from his ears and tossed them down onto the paperwork. He fixed Kobaya with a withering gaze. "I could have you arrested for breaking in here, and I could have you hanged for murder." Kobaya's voice was cold. Slowly, as if he were talking to a child, he leaned in and repeated, "Tell me about the bomb." The Asura's ears twitched. He glanced at Kobaya and Isai, and lastly, he scowled at Matcha. Turning to his young apprentice, the shopkeep snarled, "Blip. Go adjust the golem pattern so they'll stack ale kegs. We have a Norn freighter coming in this afternoon. I want those kegs marked up by 50% and placed prominently in the front of the store." Eager to leave the room, the youth rushed to obey, not daring to look back. Yom reclined smoothly in his chair. Picking up one of the pencils, he spun it through his fingers with nervous energy, much like a drummer boy on festival day. "I don't know anything about a bomb, Mariner. You've gone completely off the deep end. Are you planning to blame me for some imagined perfidy simply because you disagree with my appointment to the council?" "Shame on you." Kobaya reached out and grabbed the Asura by his ears, lifting Yom bodily from his seat. Yom squawked, reaching up to grab Kobaya's wrists. He hung there, kicking and squirming, his feet flailing above the ground. "I'm telling you I don't know anything about a bomb," Yom shrieked. "You're lying." Kobaya bounced the Asura up and down. "Talk, you mangy, gold-mongering, static sucker." Matcha encouraged. "Shake him again, Kobaya." "Kobaya," Isayi laid her hand on his arm. "Take a look at this." She spun Yom's logbook around on the desk, running her finger down the entries. "Every captain in town owes him something. Grimjaw's not the only one. Nodobi and Hedda. Even Moran." Matcha stood on her tiptoes and studied the numbers. Maybe everyone who voted yes on the council owed Yom. Well, that would explain part of it. But if they paid him with their votes, where'd he get the retainer money? Issei mused. And why set the bomb? Yom kicked free of Kobaya's hands. He landed on the floor with a heavy oof and scrambled to his feet. "I don't make bombs. If you're referring to the fire down on the docks last night, I had nothing to do with it. I was here all evening. You could have sent the messenger." "That doesn't prove anything." Matcha poked him, and Yom squawked. "I didn't send any messages, you nitwit. You and your captain both have heads made of oak?" Seizing an opportunity, the shopkeep kicked her viciously in the shin. Matcha yelped and grabbed her leg. While she was hopping about and cursing, Yam rounded on Kobaya. I don't know anything about bombs or explosions or murder. I spent my youth in a respectable laboratory, building packing golems like the ones I used to stock my store. I've never built an incendiary device in my life. Look at this. Isai was still reading the ledger. Grimjaw's last shipment was a load of construction materials to a Char outpost. Char used explosives to plant deep holes for building foundations. He could have kept some of those to make the bomb. Aha! Ha! See? Yam rubbed his aching ears. You're barking up the wrong tree, Buka. I don't care about your politics. But when you march in here accusing me of attempted murder, you've gone too far. He smoothed his ears back, wincing. I'm calling the city guard. Kobaya narrowed his eyes, ready to pick another fight. But Matcha stepped between them. Come on, Yam. They've just been in an explosion. Isai's ship took a pounding, and somebody tried to murder Kobaya. Give them a break. She took another step toward the older Asara, helping him straighten his clothes. We're all friends here, right? Friends? Are you delirious? I should. What's that you're doing, woman? Is that some kind of... What is that? While Yam was talking, Matcha had reached for the wand at her belt and murmured a few words of magic. Before he could blink, she passed her palm in front of Yam's eyes. Her hand moved away, his eyes unfocused, and the shopkeep began to wobble on his feet. Oh, he said, staring blithely at the empty space between them. A slow, droopy grin plastered itself on Yum's features, and his voice took on a woozy tone. Counselor Flax. Why, yes, I would like an award. And here I didn't think you'd noticed. How wonderful. It comes with a research grant, you say? Marvelous. Just, Yam's eyelids drooped. He muttered something indistinct, and his body sagged toward the floor. Catching him, Matcha called, "Help me get this idiot back into his chair." Colby lifted the small Asura and placed him in the seat behind the desk. Before he was even completely situated, Yam was snoring. Matcha thumped his head with her finger for good measure. The tap put Yam off balance, and he slumped face first onto the top of his desk. He's completely down for the count, but it'll only last a few hours. Sadly, he'll probably be up and around for the council vote at noon. Matcha went over to the weathered rucksacks in the corner of the room, where Yam kept his storage goods. Noting a sailor's name stitched to one shoulder strap, Matcha swept up a heavy bag and looked at the letters appraisingly. Henst, she read. Huh. She lifted Yam's head and shoved the heavy bag like a pillow between the Asura's face and the desk. Patting the sleeping Asura's cheek, she smirked. Boy, I really hope Yam drools. Good work, Matcha. Kobaya crossed his arms grimly. Darn. I was really hoping it was him. Me too, Isai sighed. Kobaya, I think we're working against the clock. Whoever did this had to have worked fast, or the attack wouldn't have been so sloppy. It would be far easier to spend a few days looking for the opportunity to get a bomb hidden in the berth of your ship than it was to track you down on the spur of the moment and hope for the best. They could even have planted charges on your keel and set it off after you took the Pride out of harbor. You'd be lost at sea. Nobody would have found out about the bomb. Maybe they weren't willing to wait that long, Matcha muttered as she draped a lace doily over Yam's head. Could have been years. Kobaya shot the Asura a stern look, and then turned back to Isai. You're right. There are easier ways to kill one person if that's your target. It's messy and designed to work even if you can't get close. They could have hired a mercenary to attack me at night on the streets. True, Isai added. Or sneak aboard your ship and set a fire by hand. A bomb does seem like a pretty obvious way to go about things. Isay's brows furrowed in thought. What does that mean? Matcha asked. Isay wrinkled her nose thoughtfully. It doesn't add up. Bombs were hard to make, and harder to design effectively. It had to be a makeshift plan, based on something scavenged and used as an attack, rather than planning out a better strategy, which meant that Isay was right. The attacker had been in a rush. Kobaya frowned. Yam had good reason to want Kobaya dead, but he didn't have the materials or the skill to put this plan together so quickly. Moreover, now that he was on the council, it didn't seem like he'd be in a very big rush. He'd gotten what he wanted, a voice. Yam could afford to take weeks to slowly get control over trade. Kobaya looked at the ledger, once more noting Grimjaw's recent cargo. It had to be more than a coincidence. He set the book back on Yam's desk. We need to have a chat with a certain ill-tempered char. So, Matcha trotted behind him as Kobaya left the office. Tell me we're not going to use the same tactic with Grimjaw. You don't grab a char by the ears. We'll just talk to him, right? When Kobaya didn't answer, Matcha asked more stridently, You've got a plan, right? Kobaya,